Next month, it'll be 5 years since I graduated from Bentley, and coming back here this weekend makes me incredibly nostalgic. I'm not only nostalgic of how amazing college life was here, I'm actually much more nostalgic when I think back to the person I was when I was sitting in your shoes as a Bentley student, and I constantly notice how much I've changed since then, in spirit and in mentality. If I had to summarize my 5 working years out of Bentley in one phrase, it would be this: when there's a will, there's a way. I think that quote speaks to me and our generation because pursuing seemingly impossible or unattainable goals is both exhilarating and a real challenge. It pushes us out of our comfort zone to try to overcome adversity and achieve something difficult that you can be proud of. I've also learned in painful depth that for every crazy and ambitious goal that you have, there's going to be a personal price you have to pay. That price might be physical, emotional, social, mental, or similar, but you have to pay it. I have 3 life stories I want to share with you today from my past 5 years out of Bentley and the lessons they've taught me that I wish I knew when I was sitting in your shoes in this auditorium. 3 stories, that's all. My first story is about my time in investment banking at one of the world's top 5 banks. Investment banking is considered the holy grail for entry-level jobs in finance. Everyone, and I'm sure at Bentley, will have heard that it's this shiny industry where everyone wants to break in because it opens up tons of doors, it's very high paying, and it's prestigious. The problem is, it's very hard to break in. It's very hard to break into investment banking because they only want to recruit from the same 10 to 15 schools, unfortunately excluding Bentley. They have a few hundred spots every year for tens of thousands of applicants. And it's very hard because the top banks want to recruit from their own pool of summer interns. And the competition for those internships can start as early as your freshman year when you don't even know what classes you want to choose. When I was a junior at Bentley, I knew nothing about this industry and I had just started learning about it. I kept hearing how shiny it was, how amazing it was. But I had none of the requirements that they look for. And to make things worse, I was an international student, which puts you at further disadvantage, as we've heard today, due to visa paperwork that employers just don't want to deal with. But somehow I had gotten obsessed that investment banking was the right move for me, so I created a plan and started reaching out to people like crazy. I reached out to hundreds of alumni from Bentley and other schools just to ask them questions. How did you get your job? How do I mold my resume? How do you get noticed? And how do I sell myself? This process was the least glamorous thing you can imagine, and many of you probably can relate. For every 100 messages I sent, I'd only get a handful of replies, some of which were rude or just not helpful. But alas, some of those replies did help. They led to introductions, and those introductions led to interviews. And slowly I started seeing results. In the end, like most of my stories today, I got a little bit lucky. My parents are Indian, but I grew up in Ecuador, so I'm a native Spanish speaker. And the Latin America Mergers and Acquisitions team at Bank of America Merrill Lynch needed someone like me. I still remember the final round interviews for that group, where 8 Ivy League candidates with prior banking internships and me. Luckily, I was selected. I'm very proud of that experience because I really obsessed over it and was the first time I achieved something of that nature. The price that I paid to get the investment banking job was simply to hustle and be persistent. But the price I paid once I was on the job was unexpectedly brutal. I'm sure many of us have read the stories about how investment bankers work 100-hour weeks and they're living in the office, etc. I don't think the stories do any justice until you actually have to live through some of this. Until your boss comes at 10 p.m. at night and gives you work where you know that means you're not going to sleep tonight when that's all you've been dreaming about for the past 3 weeks, sleeping 3-4 hours a night. Investment banking was a really hard experience and it took a toll on me. But once I lived through it after 18 months, I came up with the courage to quit the job. I realized it wasn't the right place for me. My big lesson from this story I want to leave you with is that you have to learn to separate appearances from reality. Investment banking was this shiny thing that seemed amazing from the outside, but I got swayed by it and I didn't realize if it was really the right place for me. As you pursue professional opportunities, experiences, I wish for you the wisdom to separate appearances from reality so you can find the places that are the best for you and allow you to be your best selves. My second story is about my time making a 180-degree shift from investment banking and finance into the world of technology and entrepreneurship. When I was sitting in your shoes between 2010 and 2014, companies like Snapchat, Uber, Instagram were bursting seemingly out of nowhere, reaching multi-billion-dollar valuations overnight. And some of those were founded by young men and women in their 20s. How hard could it really be? I remember my naive self thinking. So I took my banking savings and I took an 8-month sabbatical where the goal was to try new things and ultimately come up with the startup idea. I still remember the fall of 2016 is when I officially ended the sabbatical and came up with my big idea. I knew I was going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. 6 months later, I painfully realized this idea would not get me to Zuckerberg levels and that this was going to be really hard. I had to let that idea go and shift courses radically to a new one. That leads me to The Lobby. The Lobby was a simple startup idea. What if you could buy a 30-minute coaching call with someone who worked inside the company that you were dying to work for but had no connections in? I felt it was a powerful idea. I was incredibly passionate about it. I felt it was simple and it was connected to a personal problem I had had for myself and dozens of my friends. After the initial glamour of coming up with the idea faded, I started telling my friends, working on the idea, and interacting with people I respected. In all honesty, this period was quite depressing. If any of you have tried to do something new or risky, you will know you will get pushback from everyone around you, or at least most. I still remember nights where I would come home and not be able to sleep because of an innocent comment or joke a friend made about my startup idea, or that I was spending my time and savings on stupid things that would never work. Little did they know that my identity was so wrapped up in that idea that all these comments and jokes were lethal to my peace of mind. The closest thing I had to a mentor or a North Star in the startup world was the fact that I would spend ridiculous amounts of my time consuming content from one organization called Y Combinator. For those of you who don't know, Y Combinator is largely considered the world's best and most selective startup accelerator. They've been around only over a decade and have launched over $120 billion worth of startups and products that many of you use today, such as Airbnb, Dropbox, Coinbase, Quora, and many more. They have tens of thousands of applicants every year and only fund a few hundred companies. The acceptance rate is rumored to be around 1% and is rumored to be 5 times harder than getting into Stanford or Harvard. Needless to say, getting in was a dream for me. But this time I was at an even worse disadvantage. Having read all of Y Combinator's content, I knew they had a strong bias against solo founders like me, and an even stronger bias against startups where none of the founders are programmers. So that 1% acceptance rate was even lower for a company like mine. But this time my obsession was 10 times stronger than when I wanted to be a banker. So I created a plan and did the same thing. I started reaching out to anyone who would speak with me. I think I spoke after hundreds of outreach with 30 YC alumni. I consumed all their content, and I knew they were looking for businesses that had launched, that were growing, and that had a huge market opportunity. I did everything I could, and in the end, over a dozen of those alumni ended up recommending us internally. And I was able to get in as a solo, non-technical founder. I think it's the only time in my life I can truly say one of my dreams came true. I still remember crying for 30 minutes outside of the San Francisco Caltrain station when I got the call that they wanted to fund me. This moment was pure and sheer joy. My biggest lesson from this story is that daunting and crazy goals seem impossible when you look at them from day one. But if you just get started and count on the fact that little wins every week and every month, they will compound over time and get you closer to the goal. As you guys chase your dreams, just get started, go bit by bit, and persist, because the little wins eventually add up to the big ones. At the end of Y Combinator, we raised $1.2 million from some of the world's best investors. We were covered on TechCrunch, Bloomberg, tons of other publications. And I was being invited to panels and conferences, and my inbox was flooded with people asking for advice on how to build the next big startup. We had made it. Or had we? After we closed our seed round in the lobby about 1 year ago, we did what most startups do. We made a list of ideas and initiatives that we would have to undergo to grow the business to achieve its full potential. We started burning cash, we grew our team size to over 10 people, and we just started going. After 6 months of trying every possible thing I could think of, we realized it wasn't working. No matter how many experiments we did, how many initiatives we tried, the numbers that mattered for the business just would not go up. And I knew it was time to make some very tough decisions. I had to let go of all of those 10 team members, including someone who moved from New York just to join our itty-bitty startup a few months ago. And then I had to start telling my investors. Imagine having to tell people that you admire, who gave you money for your dream, to build your dream, only 6 months earlier, and say, hey, this isn't going to work out. And by the way, I might take your money to do something totally unrelated for what you funded me for. This led to another one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. I was not legally obliged to offer my investors money back, but I realized we have to think long term, and I made the hard decision to offer them that option. This entire process was one of the darkest periods of my life. After spending all my savings, after spending a lot of time killing myself to reach this point, I felt I had let everyone down and that we were starting all over again. This was the lowest point, right? The only place we could go was up. So eventually, things started taking an interesting twist. My investors humbled me, and about 60% of them stayed, with a handful of them tripling their investment just a few short months later. Fast forward again, only a few short months, we're now building something in the international logistics space, which is incredibly close to home for me because it's something my father worked on for 30 years, and it's creating jobs in the US and Latin America, the two regions that have molded my entire life. Our team is again 10 people in a much faster time span. Our revenues this month will be 5 times higher than the best month we ever had at the lobby. And all of those numbers are set to double or triple in the coming months. I have never been more excited since I graduated from Bentley. My biggest lesson from this story is that if you're going to try big and audacious goals, you have to combine that with an intense sense of reality when things aren't working. Pivoting our business entirely and offering money back were two of the most anxiety-inducing and painful decisions I've ever had to make, but are now the things I'm most proud of when I look back on my experience. I wish for all of you, when you try new and bold things, the courage to shift course radically when you deep down know you're not going down the wrong path, because that will happen. My 3 stories from today are the reason I've become much more ambitious than I was when I was a student here at Bentley. Every time I set a crazy or goal that seemed relatively impossible, some delusional part in my brain kept telling me there was a way. It kept telling me when there's a will, there's a way. Every time, I spent a lot of time identifying the right goals for myself, and when I found them, I ran towards them, and I did everything I could, accumulating those little wins until they became a reality. When I realized things weren't going down the right path, I was willing to make bold and radical changes, whether that meant restarting my career and quitting banking, or restarting our entire business. I wish for all of you the ability to find the goals that make you feel that they're the right place for you, right goals, the right experiences, to separate appearances from reality. I wish for you the courage to try bold and new things and persist, accumulating those little wins which will eventually turn into big ones. And I hope you have the sense to change course radically and have courage when things aren't working or are not right for you. And if things get unbearable, or you feel hopeless or lost, please know that I've been there, everyone I admire has been there, and you can power through. When there's a will, there's a way. Thank you.